Good day, I'm Martin Gagel with Market Radius Research. It's Thursday, February the 10th, and we've got CEO Jeremy Sobotta of Perimeter Medical joining us today. Perimeter Medical Imaging AI is a medical technology company that is driven to improve cancer surgery with ultra-high resolution, real-time advanced imaging hardware and artificial intelligence software. We're going to do a quick overview on the company as a refresher, since it's been 9 months since Jeremy first presented here. Before the company first presented, it had just received FDA breakthrough device designation, and since that time, it has announced a string of very good and significant news. So I'm looking forward to this update. But remember, this is neither a recommendation or investment advice. We're here to learn about the company, do your due diligence, and come to your own investment conclusions. Jeremy, thank you for joining us. And before you give us an update on Perimeter, what's with the tie? What's going on there?
Great. Well, yeah, thanks so much for having us. First of all, Martin, we're excited to update the audience on everything that you just talked about. But for those joining live, I am wearing a pink tie today because I am a pink tie guy. And what that means is we are in the midst of a 24-hour fundraiser regarding or supporting Susan G. Komen and all of the amazing work they do in breast cancer, both breast cancer research and, among other things. They've funded over $1 billion in breast cancer research. They offer financial support for folks going through financial hardship that need support to get their treatment. They have, breast cancer is one of the most engaged, patient advocacy groups I have ever seen out there, and Susan G. Komen helps to support that. So for everybody that's live today on February 10th, please reach out and donate to the cause. You can find a link to where you can donate on any of our social media, whether it's Jeremy Sobotta's social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc., or the Perimeter Medical Imaging AI social media platforms. And there are direct links and lots of activities happening. And obviously, in any fundraiser like this, it's very competitive. So we want to represent Perimeter and represent the Perimeter network very strongly to support this very, very good cause. So thanks for that, Martin.
All right, thanks, Jeremy. And sorry, can you just repeat the name of the foundation, the group again?
It's Susan G. Komen.
Susan G. Komen. All right, I'll tweet that out as well after the webinar here, and that's awesome. That's good, great support.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so on to Perimeter. As you mentioned, it's been 9 months since we last spoke. So just what I will do is level set for everybody and make sure we're all on the same page with a little bit of background. As you mentioned, Perimeter Medical Imaging AI, we're driven to transform cancer surgery, transform surgical oncology. And the way we're doing that is with ultra high resolution and real-time advanced imaging tools. And those imaging tools are addressing unmet needs. And we are commercial stage on our flagship product. That's the Perimeter S-Series OCT. And we can talk about, the progress we're making there and everything around that. And what that is optical coherence tomography that generates images for surgeons to see microscopic level resolution of excised cancer specimens during a procedure. So a very common problem, and we'll talk about breast lumpectomies throughout most of the presentation. When a surgeon removes that specimen from a patient today, or without Perimeter's technology, they send that specimen to a pathology lab that can take anywhere from 2 days up to a week or more to evaluate that specimen. And what they're looking for is any cancer at the edge of the tissue, at the perimeter of the specimen. And if they find cancer at the perimeter, the risk of cancer coming back for that patient doubles. So instead of accepting that risk, the surgeon would call the patient, have them come back for another operation. Surgeon would go back in, remove additional tissue until they can achieve that clear cancer-free margin or barrier of tissue. What Perimeter's imaging technology does is brings that microscopic level resolution into the operating room so the surgeon can see it in real time. And if they find that cancer at the perimeter with our technology, instead of having to call the patient back and go through a complicated, costly second operation, they can just go right back into the patient right away and take additional tissue to achieve those margins. So, a real value add for patients, providers, and payers in the system. So the S-Series OCT that we're commercializing today is that imaging technology that shows the surgeon that information. We're at clinical validation on the next generation of that technology, which includes artificial intelligence to help the surgeons interpret those images. So I often describe it as a Google Maps within the images, if you will. So the S-Series hardware generates the images that gives the surgeon the information they need. And then the artificial intelligence helps them to interpret those images, directs them to points of the image that are suspicious for being cancerous so that they can quickly look at what they need to look at and can have effectively an instant second opinion on that specimen right away. As you mentioned, when we last spoke, we had just received breakthrough device designation on that technology. So thrilled that the FDA has acknowledged this as innovative technology, improving care in a life-threatening disease, and have had significant interactions with the agency since then, and that just opens up a bunch of expedited reviews and interactions and opportunities to make sure we're getting that to market in a way that's safe and effective for patients, but also in a way that provides a platform we can continue to update and get better as machine learning does while we collect additional information and images.
Jeremy, just you mentioned it a bit, but what exactly does breakthrough device technology or that designation, what does that mean to the FDA or when they do that?
Yeah, so it starts with the problem that the technology is solving. It has to be something meaningful that is impacting, effectively a priority for the FDA's regulatory environment. And this margin assessment problem in breast cancer care as a whole is obviously very meaningful for the FDA and for patients. And when they grant breakthrough device designation, they do so for technology that is solving that problem in an innovative, new and improved way. So like nothing else, because there are a couple pathways for the FDA regulatory clearance. And you have what's called a 510K pathway, where you're relying on predicate devices that are effectively substantially equivalent to the new technology you're trying to bring out. And then there's new and improved and very innovative ways to solve the same problem that they want to acknowledge and fast track, if you will, because it's new and innovative, and that is a more burdensome regulatory hurdle to overcome, but they recognize the impact that it can make on a very important part of patient care. So they try to fast track that. And what it means for us is you get effectively a prioritized review from the FDA on your submissions and your interactions, and you get a lot of additional interactions with them. They call it breakthrough sprints. So as you're, in our particular case, as you're designing a protocol to demonstrate the clinical efficacy that you want to use, so a clinical study protocol, you want to use that data and that study to support your marketing application to the FDA at the end of it. So being a breakthrough designated device, you get to have a lot of interactions with them and say, okay, does this version of the protocol, does this data, assuming we achieve the efficacy and results that we expect in our study, would that support a marketing application after the study is complete? So things like that, and particularly, for what Perimeter is doing, we are a very unique offering out in the space. So we are an entirely new use case for optical coherence tomography, but we're also combining artificial intelligence into that technology. So, being that innovative and having a machine learning tool that, frankly, all of the regulatory bodies are still working with the pathway for how to regulate artificial intelligence and machine learning post-market. It's great to have those opportunities to interact with them and engage in those conversations so that we can structure things which would enable post-market expedited clearances and kind of least burdensome path to improving the technology for improving patient outcomes.
Awesome. Okay, thanks.
Great. Yeah, and then so from a team and the people behind Perimeter, our management team is, exclusively from medical device backgrounds. We've all spent our careers in medical devices, a lot of medical imaging specifically, and 2021 was a big year on building out that team and continuing to strengthen our talent bench. Strong board of directors, representing really every aspect of the organization, whether it's clinical needs, commercial needs, or capital markets needs. And then, in 2021, we significantly strengthened our scientific advisory board. Our longest standing advisory board member, Dr. Ted James, from Harvard Medical School, continues to be an anchor and a rock on that team, but also as we think about all the work that Dr. Beth Dupree did through her clinical studies over the year, and just her innovative and entrepreneurial spirit in adopting new technologies and transforming, surgery protocols and workflows has been a real windfall, and that momentum is continuing to build as we kick off 2022. And then, as we think, most of where we're at today is focusing on that intraoperative breast cancer market, but we see a $3.7 billion total addressable market as we expand both beyond breast cancer into other tissue indications, but also across the continuum of care, either in radiology, prior to the procedure as we think about improving biopsies, or downstream in pathology as we look at the post-operation analysis of the tissue and the specimens. So lots of opportunity there that we can dive into later. And finally, as we close the year, we announced a significant private placement led by Social Capital Holdings. They invested $43 million, which rounded out the entire private placement at just under $50 million, which was priced at the market. We're thrilled with a really strong balance sheet as we're entering into 2022, and gives us a lot to think about as we really get into this AI application in earnest, as we grow our commercial team and put our foot on the gas from that perspective, and as we think about accessing the rest of that TAM, whether it's, again, in other tissue types or in other parts of the workflow. So a lot to talk about on that front as well, Mark.
All right, thanks. Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you were maybe going. Are you going to go through some more slides, or is that's the quick overview, which is perfect?
Yeah, I think that's a good quick overview. And
okay,
we can run through the rest. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so I guess why don't we start off with the most recent news on social capital, and there are several things that that brings up. Is with that's a lot of dough. So you've got your balance sheet worries are off. And if you're negotiating with anyone, you're on a much stronger footing. You can say, hey, we've got cash. But I guess social capital is what I believe call smart money. They're not just guys with big checks. They're a value add. They're not just they've got a board seat as well, I believe, that comes with this.
That's correct,
and so it's not just, can you just talk about that value add beyond the cash, the smart money sort of component of this investment?
Yeah, everything you said is very, very true. And I would say it could not have come at a better time for us, as kind of validating the technology, the business model, what we're trying to achieve. So if you think about some of the external players that have endorsed the Perimeter, if you will, through their investments. You have the Cancer Prevention and Research Institute of Texas, a government-funded body that, we were the only award recipient in our cohort for that funding, which is driving the AI development, a big portion of the AI development. And then we have the Social Capital Group. And, as we think about I really would say partnership with us, we've already engaged with them in operational reviews, and they've helped us to think differently about different parts of our business, and kind of drive some of that forward. What you have is a kind of a complementary match here, right? So their investment thesis and stated objectives are about allocating capital towards doing good in the world. And I'd say traditionally they're a little more focused on tech disrupting things, to drive good there. Well, they're looking more and more at healthcare. Obviously, that's a big market and a big area to invest patient capital, as I would say, as they would say, into driving healthcare innovation and improving good or doing good that way. Whereas if you look at where Perimeter's coming from, we are healthcare experts, medical device experts, and we're really just at the ground floor of what this AI can do for us. So from a network expertise, other portfolio companies, social capital could not have been better for us, as we're really getting that version 1 out there into market through clinical validation, as we mentioned, but now thinking about what's next and how to use their expertise to drive that forward. So I think a number of things have signaled that you're exactly right. It's a partnership, not just a name on the cap table. I mentioned the operational reviews, the size of their investment being a deemed control entity by having more than 20%, the board seat, as you mentioned. So they're an active shareholder. They want to drive the initiative to create value that I talked about already. And it's early days, but we're thrilled to have them and thrilled to get this partnership off the ground.
Well, obviously, with a controlling interest of board seat, these guys are not short-term investors that are going to flip out in 6 months or whatever after they've got a whatever % gain on this. They signaling that this is a long haul investment and partnership.
Precisely. Yeah.
I'd like to circle back to, there are 2 sides of your business, and honestly, I got a little confused about it for a while there. You've got the hardware and the OCT, which is the camera, call it, the sensor that detects, that helps identify where there's cancer and there's not cancer. And that is, I guess we're seeing a picture of that here right now, and then you cut out the tumor or the sample and you put it on there, takes an image, and then the doctor can have a look at it. That is a commercial product that you've sold, that is manufacturing for, and has been fully approved to sell by the FDA in the US, correct?
That is correct. Yep.
And what you announced your trials on the AI imaging interpretation software, let's call it. You started that in the fall, and you've announced some sites and so forth. And that, like you were saying, is like the Google Maps, or I don't know, it gives some interpretation of it. So right now, surgeons are using it during breast surgery, and they're looking at the image saying, okay, I think that's cancer, I think that's not. And the AI will help the little red circles around, hey, this could be cancer, this could be not. It'll help them out. And that part is not FDA approved. You're going through the trial right now. Do I have that right? And could you sort of expand where necessary on that?
Yeah, definitely. I'll jump to this slide here, which kind of helps describe where we're at today, and then we'll move on to the AI and talk about that a little bit. But you summarized it very, very well. I would just add one kind of caveat that the imaging hardware that we have today is cleared by the FDA for a general tissue clearance. So what's great about that is it can be used on any, it's indicated for use on any kind of human tissue. So evaluation of breast lumpectomies, evaluation of, pancreas cancer, colorectal, kidney, anything that a healthcare professional would want to use it on, it's indicated for use on that. So that is very, very positive. Now, if we look at this screen here, you can effectively see the kind of information that this is giving to the surgeon in real time. So, maybe just a quick refresher on the workflow here. The surgeon, during the operation, the surgeon cuts out what they think is the cancer based on some of their preoperative navigation, planning, operation planning activities. So they cut out what they think is cancer. Then they have a primary lump, a primary specimen. And outside, without Perimeter's technology, they wait, up to a week or more for that, kind of pink and purple slide that you see there. It's a pathology slide. And that dark purple circle that you see at the top of that that's breast cancer at the perimeter, at the very edge of the margin. So in today's world, that patient would come back for a second operation. So that second operation is costing $16,000 average per patient. There's a 50% complication rate around things like pain management, surgical site infections, poor cosmetic outcomes, lots of problems that go along with needing to do that operation twice. With Perimeter's technology, in real time, you get that information that's on the bottom part of the slide, the black and the grayscale image there. And it's the same piece of tissue, only the surgeon can see that cancer during the first operation and immediately take action on that patient. So they don't have to, so they've removed the tumor, they put the whole tumor in our device, generate those images, they can see that right away. And then if there's a positive margin, they go back in and take additional tissue until they achieve that cancer-free barrier that we talked about, thus avoiding all of that cost and complication that we just highlighted. So that is the state of the state today. We're out there actively commercializing that. We announced our first commercial installation in December, and now that we're kind of turning into 2022 and some of the Omicron activity is thawing, that commercial team is really building some momentum, and the buzz is generating is just growing and growing by the day. Then, so here's a different kind of view of that. So effectively what we have available today, FDA cleared, is what you see on the left-hand side of this slide. So it's that imaging capital unit that we talked about. That's what sits in the OR. It sits outside of the sterile field in the operating room or operating theater. And then that, to enable the procedure is the middle pillar there, the specimen immobilizer. And what that does is very gently immobilizes that tissue so that we can get the microscopic level resolution scan needed. So if you think about kind of what we're trying to achieve, there's two things. One, we need to keep that specimen intact. So when after the surgeon reviews the images with our technology, they need to send that to the pathology lab for them to do a pathological assessment, for reasons above and beyond margin confirmation. So we need to keep it intact. Then it's very important how far away the surgeon does or does not find cancer. So it's important, you can imagine, like, if we pancake the specimen, everything would be a positive margin. Anything we found would be a positive margin because you would distort the measurement. So what that does is very gently diffuses pressure to make sure it's immobilized, a very fatty piece of tissue typically, so it's not a lot of structure anyway. So it does that in a very gentle manner for the surgeon to be able to maintain those, those distances from the edge so that they can make appropriate clinical decisions. And then the Atlas Image Library is, we've been developing this technology since 2013. So, we've acquired, millions of images to show surgeons, if I'm a new breast surgeon and I want to see what ductal carcinoma in situ is like in a dense breast with fibrous tissue, we can give them an example of that so they can, get up to speed and become as effective as possible, as quickly as possible. And so that is the FDA cleared portion today. And then, as you mentioned, we're at clinical, we have some clinical work to do to validate the efficacy of the AI. So when we move into the software side or the AI side of our equation, this is when we get into tissue specific applications. So the machine learning is trained on a particular body of images, in this case, breast cancer images. And now to get that cleared to market, we've enrolled, started enrolling patients in our pivotal study. So this is the gold standard kind of clinical data that would support a marketing application for the FDA. We have to enroll just a little over 300 patients in that study to power the study. And we expect to be through those patients this year and have a marketing application for that AI submitted to the FDA this year. So then once we submit that, there's, a 5-month review process from the FDA to ensure that, this technology is safe and effective for use on patients. And we look to have that done and the AI cleared for market in early 2023. So that's when, again, from a commercialization perspective, you have the general platform technology that is the imaging technology, and then the software and AI as a medical device component that is tissue specific. So we're effectively through development on the breast application of the AI at clinical validation, and throughout 2022 we look to have this general tissue S-series device kind of see where the market pulls us from the next tissue indication, because again, remember, it's general label clearance. So if we find that a lot of surgeons are using it for breast and then want to use it on pancreas, for example, that's a great indicator for what our next artificial intelligence application should look like.
There we go. I'm bad with the mute button. But that would be all driven off the same hardware platform. So the hardware that you're selling right now, you plug in a USB stick or whatever, or drop in a little module, and you make it smart so it can analyze the image. There's a software upgrade, or that's basically it, correct?
That's exactly it. Yep. And so for those early adopters, it'd be a field-based upgrade. We would, we'd be able to go out to their site and upgrade them to include Image Assist is the name of the AI software.
And I'm just looking at this image that you have up on the screen here, the Atlas image library, which sort of helps train the doctor. Okay, this is what it looks like. That's essentially what you're doing as well for the AI. You're giving the AI a whole bunch of images saying this is cancer, this is not cancer, this is, and then whatever the magic that is AI, it learns that. And then that's how you essentially train the surgeon as well as the AI.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That is a great way to describe it. The only thing I would say about the Atlas image library is it's broader than just breast. So we have 10 different tissue types in that library for other surgeons to be using it. So, but the concept is exactly as you described.
And do you have a sense initially about what surgeons are using? Like it's been installed for a few months now. Do you have some preliminary data? Is it all breast cancer, or are they kind of using it all over the place?
No, so far it's been all breast cancer use. Now the thing I'd say about breast surgeons is, a lot of times, or the surgeons performing breast lumpectomies, particularly in community hospitals and some of the smaller volume hospitals, those surgeons are general surgeons that do lumpectomies, and then they also do other surgeries. So, I'd say our efforts and investment has been really focused on breast to this point, and our training material is best for breast. So we're still in the early days, but those general surgeons the wheels are already spinning on how it can get into other tissue types, and we're eager to kind of support them with a little bit of additional, clinical data or training material to give them some confidence on those other patients.
And for the trial that you're currently running to test the AI, there are 300 patients, and what you're comparing it to is basically what percentage of those patients have to go in for additional surgery, as opposed to just one surgery does it all, and then it just compares that to the general population? Or is there sort of a core group that doesn't get that? Or
Yep. Both in a way, but so the actual study is designed as control group is the word that, So we have 300 patients, about 2/3 of those will be in the device arm. So they'll get the perimeter technology used on them or for them. And then there's a control group that will just go through the normal standard of care. So the end state is what you described as comparing reoperations, but we actually took it one step earlier, because there is some clinical judgment used on whether or not to reoperate on a patient. So we actually set the bar a little more appropriate and a little higher for what we're trying to do. And we are comparing the number of unaddressed positive margins between the both groups actually, between the groups that have had the perimeter technology used and the group that did not. But one of the beautiful things about the data we're accumulating is the surgeon is completing their normal standard of care before the device is introduced to the procedure. So the patient isn't randomized until after the normal standard of care. So the surgeon does what they normally would do. And then we can say at that point, okay, did you achieve negative margins or not? And we can see that. Then we can introduce the device and say, all right, how many patients went from having a positive margin to not having a positive margin by using the device, and compare the same patient pre and post device. So really, I mean, it's a perfect way to eliminate bias and sampling issues, because you're talking about the very same patient and the very same surgeon, right? So
I'm thinking as well, with when you're a surgeon, you're going there, you're cutting out the cancer. And if you don't have real-time data, and the cost, like financially, medically, stress on the patient is so high, you're probably going to err on the side of, let's cut out some extra stuff to be extra careful. And when you've got more precision and better information, you can actually cut out what's kind of necessary, meaning less invasive or less damaging and so forth. Am I right on that is one of the hopeful benefits of this?
definitely, yeah, you are 100% correct there. And I would say in the case of a breast lumpectomy patient, that is actually a fairly common practice, where surgeons will do what's called an additional cavity shave. So they cut out what they think is the tumor, and then, just for insurance purposes, like you just described, they go back in and take additional tissue from the patient. Now, in the case of a breast lumpectomy patient, the biggest negative around that is, an impact of cosmesis, which a lot of times there's some kind of reconstructive surgery happening anyways. So, surgeons, particularly oncoplastic surgeons, will say, well, I'll take insurance tissue because I'm going to do a reconstructive surgery afterwards, so I'm not as concerned about immediate cosmesis impacts. Now that, however, I would add that it also impacts, sensation and the patient's, just quality of survivorship after that, even after reconstructive surgery. So there's still an opportunity to preserve as much healthy tissue as possible. But then when I compare other, some of our other oncology applications, the more, take kidney, for example, when you're having a partial, nephrectomy, partial kidney removal, the more healthy, organ tissue you preserve, the better your postoperative organ function will be, which, very common in lung, very common in some of those other partial, prostatectomies, all of those. So, it's not just a cosmetic situation in those cases, it's actual organ function, which is, precision matters a whole lot more. So.
Okay, that makes a ton of sense. Could we talk a little bit about on the economics of these machines? How much does, what is the suggested retail price of one of these units? And they're like, you're selling, and I forget, sorry, the term, to keep the sample down in a proper way. That's a recurring type thing. So there's a base cost, there's some recurring, what do one of these machines cost? $1 million, $500,000, or?
No, for the low price of $1,000 per procedure. So here's a slide with the economic breakdown that kind of shows the impact of the payers. So I think it's important to kind of look at the value we're creating through the workflow. So what we're going to market with today, PreAI, is what you see here on the slide. So in breast lumpectomies, about 1 in 4 patients has to come back for a reoperation. So, nearly, a 25% reoperation rate. And those patients who come back, on average, cost an additional $16,000 in treatment costs, just hard dollars and cents around the additional treatment. So effectively, you have a per patient cost of $4,000. in potentially avoidable treatment costs. That's ignoring all of the soft costs around, loss of productivity for the patient, not being able to go to work, and pain management, surgical site infections, everything I talked about earlier. And what we have said to payers is, based on the technology we have today, we think it's a pretty low bar to assume a 50% reduction in reoperation. So you're taking that $4,000 cost, cutting it down to $2,000. So you're creating $2,000 worth of value in cost avoidance. And, it's a pretty elegant split to say, okay, payer, hospital, you net $1,000 of that, and then you pay Perimeter $1,000 of that. And that is effectively what we would say is a managed solution. So for the cost of $1,000 per procedure, you get the use of the capital, you get the single-use consumable that you talked about, the specimen immobilizer, and you effectively have a solution to manage your margin assessments intraoperatively.
When you're talking with the hospitals using this, do they need to sort of commit to, we do whatever procedures per month or something like that, or there's got to be, we're going to have to charge you X amount per month?
Yeah, that is exactly correct. So as part of the placement agreement, so they need to meet minimum volume requirements to justify us placing the capital unit there.
With the PreAI software, is it the surgeon who assesses the image, or do you bring in like a radiologist or some other specialist who to eyeball it to see if that's the case? And then when you get up to the AI model, would that sort of save some labor on that, where you wouldn't necessarily have to bring in that specialist?
Actually, with both versions, it's the surgeon who makes the ultimate clinical decision. So PreAI, the surgeon can do it, and we have a robust education platform and support network to help the new users onboard effectively. So we have a team of what we call image training specialists out there in the field that are onboarding new users. They help them through evaluation. They go through a pretty intense training process prior to even doing a demonstration with the technology. So, we arm the surgeons to do that. And, if you think about our go-to-market strategy, let me just jump on that. So one of the things about our go-to-market strategy before AI is we're focused on surgeons that use a lot of imaging in their practice. So these are early adopters. So these are folks that use a lot of ultrasound, and our technology is analogous to ultrasound. Just instead of using sound waves, we use light waves to interrogate the tissue. So, so that group of surgeons, which is about 30% of breast surgeons, is a perfect early adopter market for us to pick up this technology and be able to interpret those images quickly. And our 2022 commercial efforts are around finding those user profiles that can become the thought leaders and experts throughout the year, so that when the AI comes, you now have effectively an army of evangelists for the technology that can then bring it out into the community hospitals and the surgeons that aren't as imaging savvy, I suppose I'd say. And so the one thing I would say though is still the AI, even with the AI, the AI is not a diagnostic tool. It's an adjunct tool to help the surgeon focus on parts of the images that are important. So we do anticipate some labor reduction or some workflow reduction in time, because the AI can direct the surgeon quickly to focus on areas. But from a diagnostic perspective, it's really more of a second opinion. So what we've seen in our early clinical work is surgeons are much more confident in their decision making if the machine learning kind of is concordant with their decision. So it's a software-based second opinion, if you will.
All right. When you're in the when you're in the selling process, is obviously a long sales cycle process. What are the pushbacks, or what are the concerns? Are people saying, "Oh, this is cool, but I want to wait to see more sort of practical data out there, or wait for the AI to come out and then we'll maybe buy it"? Or is it Like what is the pushback or the challenge in the sale?
Yeah, no, I think, there are some profiles that we know are going to wait for the AI to come out. That's not, we know that even before talking to them. So that does exist, but we, really focus our energy on the kinds of folks that are going to be these early adopters and these, pre-AI adopters of the technology. I'd say, recently, particularly, kind of in the back half of 2021, our biggest challenge was really just dealing with external factors around getting perimeter personnel into the hospitals under COVID restrictions. There's the nursing and staff turnover in hospitals makes it really challenging to bring new equipment into the operating room because they're learning new protocols every single day. So that has been, particularly challenging. I'd say as we turn into 2022, we're feeling more and more bullish about that, and the buzz has really increased, and the momentum is increasing there. But from a desirability perspective, I actually have been pleasantly surprised at our sales force's ability to get meetings to introduce this technology to surgeons. It's not something where they hear about what we're doing and say, don't talk to me, I already do it my way. They actually want technology to help them solve this problem. And when they hear about the way we're solving that problem for them, they're eager to hear more. So we can get the remote demo, we can get the surgeon engaged. They're extremely excited about the prospects of the technology. Then when we move into the in-OR portion of the demo, where they actually use it on real patients, that's when we're working through some of those restrictions and challenges that I just alluded to. But even with that, I've been, the feedback we've received from evaluations has been, overwhelmingly positive. You may have seen on some of our social media, some of the users taking pictures and expressing their excitement. And, what I'd say is, it's early yet, but we're getting a real validation of all of our, technology hypotheses. So, whether it's somebody like our first commercial installation in a higher volume, more, resource rich institution, I'd say. So she's able to impact patients and has quickly become effective with it. And some of our more recent, demo activity in more rural community hospitals where they don't have access to the same resources, we have effectively democratized the kind of results that you would get in an academic institution. So, both ends of the spectrum being able to benefit from it. And, we're really excited about the prospects of 2022 from that perspective.
Right. Can you talk what you're working on the clinical trials? You're commercially selling the hardware unit. You're contemplating what could be the next indications that you go after. What kind of news flow in 2022 should we be looking for what kind of news flow?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, our priority number one is executing commercially, making sure we continue to build that key opinion leader base, and we're recruiting and growing our sales force as we speak. So, that's where we'll win in the future, is by winning today commercially. So definitely some news flow on that front. And just as a reminder, I've been guiding towards, let's not think about how many installations we have, but where we're making those installations. Are these the kinds of user profiles that fit what I described earlier, that can become the evangelists and peer-to-peer, kind of influencers once the AI is cleared? Definitely continued progress on the clinical study there, getting the validation of the efficacy of the AI is going to be a huge value creator, value accelerator for us. So, as we continue to get new sites up and running, get through patients, we'll have some news out there around progress on that front, and, potentially some interim data and some early looks at the data as we, get through patient enrollment. And then you're exactly right. I think, from a R&D perspective, 2022 is going to be a big year and a transitional year as we think about what you described and looking at other tissue types. but also we're really excited about the prospect of being in other parts of the workflow, whether it's, supporting radiology in their work on biopsies, or supporting pathology post-op in their analysis of the tissue after the operation. So definitely you'll see some, clinical work on both of those fronts happening over the next handful of weeks and months to, get moving in that direction in earnest. And then lastly, I'd say from a corporate development perspective, we one of the things that are, the strong close to the year has enabled for us and the social capital private placement is, giving us a very strong balance sheet and a strong foundation on which to think about, uplisting to a senior exchange and what that might look like. So continuing to put all the pieces of the puzzle in place to do that when the time is right.
Yeah, I was actually just about to ask that. There's a lot of US, you have a Toronto operations, but a lot of it's US, your target market's US. You just got some big smart capital out of the US. NASDAQ seems to make a whole lot of sense. So that's something you're contemplating and working through, seeing how the stars align in 2022?
Definitely, yeah, 100% in our corporate strategy for this year. And I think all along we've said that's part of our plan, but we want to make sure we have the right kind of business to justify that uplisting and get up there and have kind of a couple of fundamental operational quarters under our belt, some momentum on the commercial front, and we'll get up there with a lot more to talk about when we're ready to do that. So definitely.
Are you giving any guidance this year on how many units you hope or expect to sell? Any guidance on that?
No, we've been more kind of milestone focused on our guidance to date and continue to be that way for the time being. So, we've got, we'll continue to give updates on the commercial progress as we go and continue to give updates on the clinical progress as we go. And, those are two of the biggest value streams for us for 2022. So, but I can say, I am extremely pleased and extremely excited as we have, built out that team, the amount, the level of talent we've attracted to the sales force, and just, it was a little bit like somebody flipped a switch at the end of the year from a buzz and activity on the commercial front for us. So, really pleased with where 2022 is getting off to, starting off with. So.
All right. We've got some questions here from the audience, so I'm going to hit those. I don't see it right now, but someone had their hand up, and I honest to God don't know what that means. If you have a question to ask, type it into the Q&A feature, and I will read that out. So for the first one, have procedure codes been established for use of the S-Series OCT, and has any insurance reimbursability been established?
So the answer to the first one is yes, we do have codes. We have what's called a Category 3 code, which is a tracking code, if you will, which means the answer to the second question is no at this point. So, effectively, like I said, in December, we just announced our first commercial installation. So that's really where we begin tracking utility of the technology with those patients. So we have the codes to use as the technology is used in the different procedures, both commercially and clinically over the course of 2022 and beyond. We'll be able to, demonstrate to the insurance companies and the payers just how impactful this technology is on those patients. So now, once they can see the billing, the broad-based billing across, really the U.S., they'll be able to see, the impact and isolate the impact of the technology on the cost of treating those patients. So the hurdles to those and the expected timeline, as we move from a Category 3 code to a Category 1 code to actual reimbursability being established, we'll see in these early days what kind of feedback we get from insurance companies. If they deny and we have to go through some appeals processes, that's not uncommon for new medical technology. We'll work through that. Attached to the clinical validation on the AI study, we also have a healthcare economics and outcomes research study happening at the same time. So we'll continue to, build a body of clinical evidence and, gold standard randomized control trial clinical evidence to support the impact that this technology can have. So we're kind of, taking the approach from two different angles. One, from the actual billing cycle and letting the insurance companies track utility, but also through our clinical study progress and demonstrating, the economic impact on that front as well.
And what the insurance companies want to see, that there's economic and health outcome utility associated with this, and that it makes sense to pay for it.
Yeah, exactly right. I would maybe just restate that a little bit and say that the insurance companies are looking for value. So they want to make sure that there's value from, using this technology on patients. And, that can be, in our case, we believe that we'll be saving money, but, they're not, the economics aren't really the driver. It's the patient outcomes and improved outcomes compared to the cost inputs that are required that they'd be looking at from a coverage determination. So.
And do you talked about an economic study and so forth. So do you provide like a package to them saying, hey, here is the evidence as to why there is value there and positive outcome?
Exactly right. Yep. So it's really a broad-based body of clinical evidence, some of that authored by Perimeter, some of that authored by, institutions or other OCT, fundamental technology studies, and all of that, we call it kind of a constellation of data inputs for the payer to use to determine that.
And does Medicare, Medicaid lead or follow that? Are they typically the first ones to do it, and then once they start paying, then the private healthcare pays? And if I'm Canadian, so I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to U.S. insurance. So I don't know if I'm sort of on the right question there.
No, that's a great question. Yeah, so CMS is the organization that governs both Medicare and Medicaid, and there's not a straight answer there. I would say, their determination carries a lot of weight. Kind of a broad-based impact of their determination. But it's a government institution. Things happen slow in the government, so typically they're not leading from a timeline perspective. So, I would say, there's a lot of transition happening in the U.S. healthcare system, particularly on the commercial or private insurance company side of the equation. There's a big desire to go towards bundle payments or pay for, it's called accountable care organization. So, they want to pay to solve the breast cancer problem, and they'll give you one amount of money to solve that problem. It's up to you how many times you have to operate to solve it. So it's, shifting from a fee for service to a pay per episode of care, and we land squarely in those initiatives. So if it's an integrated payer provider where they're an insurance company and a hospital, they're sharing the same bottom line, that's right up our alley. And I would say that's kind of from an insurance company perspective, those are the early targets that would be, inclined to implement some kind of initiative to drive the adoption of technologies like perimeters.
All right, and then with that, from the same person is a sort of another part of it. What hurdles remain in the way of the company securing wide commercial uptake on the S series? We've kind of talked about that as well. Is there anything you want to add to what we've talked about, or is we've kind of hit it already?
Yeah, no, I just really quickly, I'd say that, like any adoption of new technology, that's kind of a snowball effect. So as we get new users, get more education, better thought leaders out there using it, it kind of just all builds on itself. We talked about the AI and the B series, but, even XAI or, ignoring the AI, as new users start using the technology, and then they're training their fellows and their residents along with the technology, and that just kind of grows on itself once you get some critical mass. So,
and circling back to the pricing, when you upgrade to the AI, are you going to be able to charge more at that point, or is it just going to be sort of part of the bundle?
No, we fully anticipate being able to charge more. So if you think back to the value creation slide that I highlighted, let me
yeah.
over to that. So where we believe the AI will increase the value of Perimeter's technologies on two fronts. One, we anticipate this 50% number being able to grow, and we'll have, again, gold standard clinical data to demonstrate that we can achieve better than that. Actually, even some of our early clinical work and some of our earlier studies, would suggest that we can achieve somewhere in the 85 to 95% reduction rate or accuracy rate. So if we can, improve the cost reduction measure, we can increase the, the value that we create. So that's one major area of, value creation and the ability to price, additional, an additional amount for the AI. But then from a workflow perspective, we think the review time will be faster as well. So, OR time is expensive. It's time is money in the OR. So being able to do the review in, 5 to 10 minutes instead of 10 to 15 minutes is a big deal, actually. So that's helpful from that perspective.
As you're going to be selling it on you're kind of leasing it or a SaaS kind of a model. You've got a nice healthy balance sheet now. Is that going to be put onto your balance sheet, or are you going to go through a leasing company? Or I'm sure this isn't a unique model, and there are U.S. Financial companies that can know how to structure stuff like this so it doesn't all hit your balance sheet.
Yeah, I think the answer will be both for the foreseeable future, for the near term. I think particularly in these early days with the balance sheet we have today, to accelerate the sales cycle, shorten the sales cycle as much as possible, we'll hold it on our balance sheet. But you're exactly right that white label leasing offer is very common. Our customers are familiar with it. The banks are familiar with it, and that's a path we could take to really reduce working capital needs from that perspective.
Given what the minimum amounts are, is there like a payback period or an ROI on your end that you can discuss, or what is the cost to manufacture one, so we can just sort of get a sense of how much investment goes into a hospital to get $1,000 a procedure?
Yeah, we'd expect in an average volume institution, depending on what exactly you burden it with, but we'd expect to be cash positive somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 months on an installation. So, that's the payback time to Perimeter. And actually, in the case of the hospital, so the customer's payback is basically immediate because they're investing $1,000 to avoid a $4,000 cost. So,
okay. All right. There's a question here. Does Perimeter have the capacity to roll out their imaging scanners? Do you have them stocked in inventory, or is there a lag time from order to delivery? You did announce earlier last year, I believe, that you have a manufacturing partner that makes them for you. Can you talk about your supply chain, and then maybe as well talk about the general world of supply chain and whatever chips or semiconductors or imaging stuff you need? Is that hindering you guys in any way?
So today, no, it's not hindering us in any way. We have everything you saw in the news around supply chain, we have experienced. So, there was difficulty sourcing chips, or delay in sourcing chips, I'll say, not necessarily difficulty. There was, shipping challenges, as we have, some of our monitor equipment comes from Taiwan. So, everything that you heard about, we experienced. Now, what I would say is, one of the other benefits of being able to strengthen our balance sheet during these uncertain supply chain times is we've been able to, project our demand much more, with much more confidence to our manufacturing partners. So you're right; they are manufactured by a group called Minitronics Medical in St. Paul, Minnesota, and they've been a great partner to work with. They're a large-scale contract manufacturer for medical devices, so they're they have influence with the tier 2 and 3 and 4 suppliers that we otherwise would not have. So they've been great. And what we've done is effectively, put, our anticipated next few quarters of demand on our balance sheet today, and then continuing to try to build and make sure that supply chain is not an issue for us going forward. So we've, we have recently and we'll continue to hold more inventory than we would in from a safety stock perspective in a steady state. But for the time being, we don't see any disruption that's slowing us down.
All right. And a question here, like you just got a large chunk of funding. Is that enough funding to take you to profitability where you're self-funding?
We anticipate the answer to that is yes. I would say, we're triangulating on a couple of things, and one of the things we're really excited about is the ability to accelerate value creation with that funding. So, along with that comes some additional burn, but between the funding on the balance sheet and the access to capital through those warrants, we fully anticipate we'll be into cash flow positivity. Yep.
Are you, with your use of your capital now, are you at all looking at maybe expanding into Europe or other large markets, or are you waiting, just focused on the US, make sure that's up and running, and then when everything's going well here, then contemplate other markets?
So we definitely are moving in the direction of international expansion. I'd say there's 2022 will be again more of a foundational year for that. So, building our, regulatory and quality management system in a more global nature than being US focused. But what will be a big enabler, and one of the kind of the prerequisites we're thinking about, is having what's called country of origin clearance in the US first. So we want to get the FDA clearance on the AI and the breast specific indication on the AI cleared, and that will be the indication we want to take into international markets. And it'd be kind of your typical cast of character medical device markets that we'd be thinking about. So probably not a 2022. From an output perspective, probably not a 2022 activity, but a lot of the inputs and foundation building from the internal part of the organization will be happening throughout the year.
All right. And there's another question here on, are there any missing pieces to the company? Is there any M&A you need to do, or really, like, obviously you want to expand into different cancers and so forth, but at this point, are there any missing pieces to the puzzle, or are you kind of good?
No, I'd say, from an M&A perspective, obviously, like I said earlier, there's a lot of innovation happening in the space. So we keep our eye on that, and we'd be opportunistic with something like that should the right situation, arise, and it's right for the organization, and organizationally, we think it will enhance value. So obviously, we monitor that. I'd say, from a talent perspective, we're continuing to build out the team, both commercially and from an R&D perspective. So we'll continue to grow from a human resource perspective. But, I'd say any missing pieces are, we don't have any missing pieces. It's, we'd be more thinking ahead and be opportunistic on tucking anything into the portfolio for that matter.
Okay, great. And someone's asking, what has been the biggest challenge that Perimeter has experienced so far? And what is currently your biggest thing?
I think, I guess ultimately, just given the timeline and where we're at, I hate to be the guy that says COVID, but I'm going to say COVID as more of an umbrella thing, though. So, access to facilities, like I talked about earlier, hospitals, their attention span has just been distracted from what we're working on historically. So that's been a bit problematic. And then, effectively, I guess the root cause on the supply chain stuff we just talked about, would have been COVID. But for me, the biggest challenge is we're, scaling up an organization and growing significantly in this time when access to talent and, recruiting, more people are leaving the workforce than are joining the workforce, right? So that's been something that has been a big focus for the organization, and, is kind of the classic, what keeps me up at night, I'd say, is the, recruiting and scaling the organization from a talent perspective, for sure. So, You know, so that's, I'd say that even, you know, that's still continuing today. So I'd say that's even the big thing that's on our mind today at the moment as well. So.
Yeah, the scaling is because, yeah, that's, I can imagine that big.
Yeah.
And thanks, you addressed someone else's question who specifically asked what keeps you up at night.
Oh, great.
When do you anticipate launching the non-breast cancer consumable business? Will it be meaningful?
Yeah, so I fully expect to see some of that activity happening in 2022. You know, so the good thing about that is, you know, we don't really need to effectively launch a new technology to access those markets. We, you know, based on the clearance we have with the S series, you know, we can drive, or we can allow surgeons to use the technology in some of those other non-breast applications like we talked about. So it's just, you know, they won't have the AI, which is, you know, a different kind of hurdle. But just based on what I'm hearing from the sales force, from the customers as we go to, you know, oncology trade shows and some of those activities as well, I think there's a huge demand to see the impact in other tissue types, and I think you'll see some activity on that throughout the year. Now, will it be meaningful? I think that's still a TBD, I'd say. You know, meaningful in 2022, probably not. Meaningful in 2023 and beyond, definitely. And, you know, even if it's only planting the seed to drive the next AI application, you know, that's a very exciting opportunity to get the non-breast consumable out there collecting data for us, if nothing else.
Going into like those consumables, that wouldn't directly, it's not like you charge an extra $100 for consumable. That's part of their $1,000 a procedure. So it doesn't have a direct revenue impact, but once you have them, then they can start doing those procedures, which will be more $1,000 coming through the door, right?
Yeah, and exactly. And maybe to touch on kind of the payback period equation we were talking about earlier, you know, our goal is to maximize utility of every capital unit. And, you know, particularly in, you know, the community hospitals that are lower volume, if you can have them using that machine in the OR every single day, you know, so you might have a breast cancer list one day and then, you know, a thoracic surgery list the next day. If we can have the capital unit in there generating consumable utilization, that, you know, the more tissue types, the better from a profitability perspective for us. So.
All right, and one final question here, and we are over an hour into this, so we should be wrapping it up. Thanks for your time. And it's a good sort of wrap-up question as well. Biden's administration has announced a cancer moonshot campaign designed to cut cancer deaths in half within the next 25 years. Does and would Perimeter be affected in any way by this, some funding, or have they been specific on how they're going towards that moonshot?
Well, so I think it can only be good for us, you know, and what I would say is if you think about where, you know, activities or initiatives like that have been allocated, or frankly, where capital has been allocated over the last several years, what I say is, you know, there's been a ton of work focused on, you know, the early detection of cancer, which is very important, which is actually an enabler for technology like us. So if you find, you know, take the case of breast cancer, the earlier you find it, the more likely you are to find what's called ductal carcinoma in situ, or the, you know, the early stage progression of the disease. And that is the exact kind of, you know, patient that would benefit from technology like ours being able to identify those margins during the procedure. So that's good news for Perimeter. And then downstream, there's a lot of work on treatment of cancer, whether it's drug therapy, immunotherapy, chemotherapy, all of that stuff. Meanwhile, we are living in this place in the operating room, and, you know, I've worked in surgical businesses for, you know, almost my entire career, and I would say, you know, if you have the opportunity to take it out of me, please take it out of me. I'd rather have you cut it out instead of have to go through chemo or radiation or drug therapy. So I think there's a ton of opportunity to accelerate innovation in the surgery suite, in the operating room for treating cancer. And, you know, the more awareness we can raise to that, and the more funding that can be allocated to that will also just be good for Perimeter.
Jeremy, thank you very much. That was super informative. I've You know, I was always a little confused by Perimeter. I've been a shareholder for a long time, but all the moving parts and so forth. But this really seemed to clarify things for me. I hope for the audience as well. So thank you very much for your time. And I'll be watching your progress over the next months.
Great. Thanks so much, Martin. It was a pleasure to be here.
Cheers.